All right. Wake up, pre-health sharks. Thank you for joining us for our weekly segment where our career experts tackle various pre-health topics. Today, we're going to be covering personal statements, one of the more challenging topics. And so I'm going to turn it over to our experts to introduce ourselves. First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Emilio Lorenzo. I'm the Associate Director of Employee Relations, and I'll let the two other experts on the call jump into who they are.
Thank you, Amelia. My name is Gabby Gross. For those who don't know me, I'm a career advisor in the Office of Career Development.
And hello, my name is Danny Caracki Suarez, and I'm also an Excel Career Advisor at NSU's Office of Career Development with the reflective glasses today. Thanks for joining us.
I have the same thing. You can see the reflections right on.
I feel left out. I don't have them.
We'll get
I'll let you borrow my other glasses.
For the next one, Gabby. So we are part of the Wake Up Pre-Health Sharks. We're the experts. Today we're going to be talking personal statements, very relevant for this time of year as you're applying to professional school, graduate school. One of the key elements of an application are personal statements. So we're going to be tackling this topic, giving you tips on how to get started, explaining what it is, and all the different kind of criteria that goes into writing a personal statement, and maybe getting your ideas flowing of how you can write your own personal statement after we're done today. And so we have a lot of students on the call, on the Zoom chat. And so if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. We're recording the session, but this is all for you and for students. And after we're done, it's going to be available on our YouTube chat. So let's dive into the topic. What is a personal statement? I think many people struggle even with that beginning. What is this document? And the technical definition, it's an essay written by an applicant for acceptance into graduate school. And that's true. But really what it is, it's a chance for you to showcase who you are. Explain your journey to this point. You know, if you're applying to professional school like medical school or PT school, there's a long journey that leads you into this application. And yeah, you have different parts of your application that you could talk about your experiences, but it's not very often that you could talk with passion in your application, that you could explain your journey. You could talk about those hiccup moments or when things didn't go so right. But you could also talk about those aha moments, like how did you find out that this was the field for you? How did you confirm this passion? How did you be able to sell your experiences? Almost giving them a helicopter shot of what led you to this point. Your personal statement can give a lot more details. It can sell yourself. It also talks about who you are as an individual, as opposed to just, hey, this is what I've done and these were my tasks and duties. The personal statement is a selling point. It allows you to really dive deeper into what you saw, like almost explaining a shadowing experience or explaining a mission trip or just different things that made you think, you know, I didn't always know that medicine was for me, but here's how I figured it out. It allows the reader to almost be on that journey with you and understand all the different little elements that made you be like, wow, that's why I want to be a doctor. That's why I want to be a dentist. And it allows the application committee and admissions committee to know more about who you are as an applicant, what makes you tick, your intangibles, things that are hard to come across with a resume or the application process, or even in your letters of recommendation. Who better to sell yourself than yourself? And so it's a good way of kind of being able to tackle that. I had a little bit of an Austin Powers moment where I was allowing myself to introduce myself.
That's great.
That's kind of a personal statement in a very large nutshell, I guess.
And you know, these are actually, as a career advisor, some of my favorite appointments to work with, because I feel like I'm learning a lot about the personal side of the student and their passion areas on why they want to go into this field. So feel free to really dive deep into your own story and really let your voice come out in these documents, because it's really what's showing these admissions committees who you are as a person. And it's not quite a retelling of your resume and everything you've done, but those major key points in your life that really stand out, like Amelia was saying.
And we have a lot of slides where we're going to ask you questions. Sometimes you think, oh, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a dentist, I want to be a PT. But then being able to really dive into the whys and how did you figure it out instead of just reading it? So we're going to be diving into a lot, not to jump too ahead. So brainstorming, I'll turn it over to one of our experts to jump into this topic.
Thank you, Emil, and thank you, Danny. Danny, I'll have to echo what you just said. I think personal statements is really one of my favorite, excuse me, appointments as well. It just helps me to really get to know my students, and it also helps the student to start to really think about why is it that this is what they want to do? What is their story? What is their background? And how did it get them to this point? So I think just starting on the discussion of brainstorming is so important to do before you get started on writing a personal statement or a personal, essay. I think that brainstorming gets the student to think freely, think openly, start to really jot down those ideas that they're wanting to touch on in their statement before just diving in deep and writing. Like you said, Dan and Emilio, this is such an open, personal thing that it's not like a resume. It's not like a cover letter. It's not so, perfect black and white type of, situation. You're really going to want to start thinking deeply about what you're going to want to be discussing in this statement. So to start off, I think theme development is so important. So choosing like that central topic, I think it was really elementary school or middle school that we learned about themes and why they're so important to bring up in any sort of essay, but especially this personal statement. You're going to want to be always consistently going back to a theme within your essay, and that's something that us as career advisors can help you to figure out and discuss with you. Story banking as well is super important. So bringing up stories from, your past or your present that can really support what you're trying to get across, really support the point or the theme that you're trying to get across in your statement. Creating an outline as well, super important. Jotting down some bullet points, making sure that you have just really a fresh sheet of ideas before you get started. Recording yourself. So obviously, we're recording this, which is funny enough. Recording yourself, either speaking with your career advisor about it, recording yourself, just speaking about your ideas. That way you can go back to it when you are writing your statement and you have those ideas fresh in your head rather than trying to think, oh, wait, I don't really remember what I said. So, and I know this is something Amelia always brings up too. I remember when I first started working as a career advisor in the office, like my first week, he was like, just tell students to record themselves. Like you bring it up all the time. And I think it's so important and it's true. I even catch myself forgetting to tell students that. And I'm like, oh, darn it. I wish I told my student that because it is such an important thing. And that way they don't forget really what they want to discuss. Timing, also very, very important. You don't want to wait till the last minute for anything in life, but especially for this, you want to make sure that you're drafting something at least a month before your deadline. That way you have enough time to do, a number of drafts if needed. And then lastly, knowing your character limits, really depending on whatever program you are applying to. Every program has a different number of character limits. And I know on Handshake, we have a great resource explaining that. So any other thoughts on brainstorming that you guys have?
That was some really good points, Gabby. And I know I've been a big point on record yourself. And that doesn't just mean in your meetings with a career advisor, which I think is going to be really important to you getting this document off the ground. But if you've never had to answer out loud why you want to be a doctor or why you want to go into this professional program, talk to someone you are comfortable in these conversations, your parents, your mentor, your friends. Record these conversations. Have your friends ask you these difficult questions, but make it a conversation. It's going to be easier for you to take that information and then start thinking about how can I put this into, or students always ask, how do I put this into my own words? But then when you're having a conversation, it is coming out in your own words. And so you almost have a different mindset when you're still just, instead of just being in front of the computer and be like, what am I going to type? Instead of just asking yourself, why did I get into this profession? Why am I passionate about it? When was the first time I started thinking about I want to get into this profession as a whole? And you might even have to time travel back to, well, my parents were in healthcare. Great. But every time you think of those moments, tie it back to yourself. At the end of the day, it's your personal statement. So if you're mentioning your parents, family, or things of the moment that you started thinking this could be for you, how did it impact you? How did it affect you? And personal statements sometimes have very difficult stories like, family member passing away or difficulties you had in your own healthcare experience. It's okay to bring these things up, but focus in on how that experience impacted you, not just so the reader knows what you've gone through, which is important, but it really needs to be zeroed in and the tone of it needs to be about how it impacted your journey because it's all about your path to this program.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, let's keep on rolling.
And so when you're looking at the actual personal statement, it can be a little daunting, especially when you see some of these character limits can seem a little bit longer, like maybe a 5,300 character paper for med school. But it helps a lot when you break it down into 4 pieces for yourself. And we're each going to go into some different chunks of them. But one would be the spark, the confirmation, now and the future, and then conclusion. So we'll go ahead and start with number 1, the spark.
And one thing, if I could mention, because I know we're going to be talking about all these areas, the one thing we may not touch upon is the introduction. It's easier going through these 4 parts that we're going to be talking about and then developing an introduction. The introduction should really do 2 things. It should foreshadow, you know, like it's setting up what you're going to be talking about. Don't let the reader run into surprises. The introduction should really set up everything you're going to be talking about in your personal statement. That's why it's best talking about, like, you know, as I reflect on my experience that led me to this point, I've thought about my research experiences or the first moments that I've been impacted in healthcare, as opposed to starting with, you know, Albert Einstein said that relativity is in that it's about who you are and what that impacted you. So start a quote about yourself. I think it's something we've talked about in other segments, but don't start with, you know, a quote from somebody else. Start with a life motto if you wanted to, but instead also tell them what you're doing. You're reflecting. It's almost like that TV show where the bubble comes out and that person's daydreaming and thinking back to that, you know, moment in time or that specific moment where it really kind of created that spark. And that leads us perfectly into the next slide, which is the spark.
Yes, thank you, Emilio. That's a perfect transition. So when it comes to the spark, it leads a lot to helping you form that introduction to know what that big theme, like Gabby was talking about, is going to be throughout your paper. So some questions to consider. This is really you wanting to show these readers and the admissions team how it was that you were able to really gain that interest in either PT or medicine, optometry, whatever it was. That was that first moment you realized, oh, this might be something I really want to explore a little bit further. Some questions that could help you in diving deeper into your own mind could be, when did you realize you wanted to pursue this career? Why is this a passion? For some people, it might be that maybe they have some family members or friends that they've seen work in this field and they've gotten to really understand the day-to-day, what it takes. And some people, it might have been from like a shadowing experience they had maybe their first year in college or volunteering at a hospital. Even for my own personal statement, applying to a master's program in college student affairs, I talked about my own experience. The spark was, I'm the first one in my family going to college and I'm an undecided major and I don't know what to do at all. So I'm exploring all these different career paths, and that helped me realize maybe I'd want to be a career advisor one day. So that was my own spark that I expanded on in my personal statement. So it's thinking about what are those different things that made it feel like this is my calling into this field. And you want to show them that with a true passion, because it's coming out with your own voice and that story that brought you to that piece. Some other questions here to help you think about it is there an event or multiple events that sparked this interest? And when did you first realize that this was for you? So sometimes it could be that one moment, like in high school, where maybe in a biology class when you were doing that dissection and everyone else thought it was weird, but you thought it was so interesting. That could have been one of those sparks. So it could be a mentor. Really, there are so many things that could be that spark. And that's the first thing you're really going to want to look for to start molding that personal statement.
I want to add too, Danny, that this work looks differently for every student. You know, I've had a lot of students come to me and say, you know, I don't know, I think it wasn't really till high school or wasn't really till college that I figured this out. And that's okay. You know, not every student may have figured out what they wanted to do when they were 5 years old, 6 years old, like you were saying, Danny. Mm-hmm. I as well, I didn't figure out what I wanted to do until college myself. So it's okay that everyone's spark and when they realize this is what they wanted to do looks differently. And I wanted to really enforce that.
Yeah. Definitely.
And not every explanation of how the spark started needs to be the next amazing motion picture movie that Disney's going to buy up and put on Disney Plus. It needs to be your story. So don't worry that your friend, oh, they have a more interesting story than me. That's not what they're measuring. They just want to know more about you, what makes you tick, what's led you, what's your passion, what drives you. And so some personal statements are going to start with a spark story that might be their first time in the ER unit when they were shadowing. And they might be very descriptive, like, you know, code blue, code blue. I'll never forget my first day as an EMT, hearing those first words. As I reflect back on my application to medical school, I thought about experiences like this that had me to adapt and really understand that healthcare is ever changing, but it's also exciting the impact you can have on the lives. And I got to see that firsthand in this first day in the EMT. Again, I know that's a great start, but not all of them have to go that route. There's so many avenues for you telling your story, but understanding and being able to zero in on what your spark is, it's going to help you out, not just in this personal statement, but when you go into the interview, you're going to be able to sell in a great way what really drives you towards this field. All right, let's keep going. We got the confirmation, and I think I'm up on this one. So before I dive into the questions on this topic, it's important that you know that I almost ended the last slide with that same point. There's two things that you're going to be asked constantly throughout this application process, whether through the application itself or the interview or the personal statement. What was the spark, or why do you want to be a doctor, a dentist, a pharmacist, you name it? And how did you confirm that? That's two different pieces. Why you want it and how you confirmed it is two different things. I may want a Corvette. Have you actually test drove a Corvette? And so you need to actually be able to identify, not just I want to be a doctor because my parents were in healthcare, or that I read online on how doctors can impact the lives of others. What steps did you take to confirm this passion? And that could be through shadowing, could be research, internships, or other immersion you've had in healthcare. It also could be a part of, you know, family experience, your own personal experiences, whether you've gone through a very difficult healthcare situation and the individuals that, you know, supported you, the healthcare professionals that impacted your lives, that was one of the sparks. But then after that experience, what else did you do to figure out, now this is for me? I see how the doctors work with patients. I have those same approaches in other settings in my life. Or I always have a drive to impact others, and I'm seeing that being able to work with my hands, something I'm passionate about because I also love art, I see that correlation there. There's a lot of different ways of being able to explain that confirmation, but you really need to ask yourself, not just why I want this, but what are the steps and how do I explain how those steps I've taken have confirmed this interest? So some questions you want to consider is, how did you learn more about the field? Are there shadowing or internship experience that opened your eyes to confirm this passion? What skills did you gain that helped you in this professional field? Like, you know, a helpful thing you should do is ask your family, ask your friends, ask yourself, what do you love about your family doctor or whatever profession you're getting into? Or even ask yours, if you don't have a, you know, professional in that field, what makes up a good PT? What makes up a good OT, a speech language pathologist, you name it. Write those qualities down, because I guarantee you, if you ask someone, hey, what do you love about your doctor? The first thing they say isn't amazing clinical abilities. No one really said they make me feel comfortable. They know how to take complex information and put understandable terms. They're so patient. They're so knowledgeable. All these different things. Like clinical skills might come up, and obviously you want a doctor that's, you know, savvy with their clinical skills. But there's a lot of other things that really determine a successful doctor, because if you have a doctor that's amazing at clinical abilities, can diagnose anything, but he has no bedside manner, are patients going to leave there and be like, what an amazing doctor? Chances no, it needs to be a balance of all these other skills. So really start thinking about, what are the other skills that make up a doctor? Do I see those same skills or even values in myself? And so that ability to advocate for others, like for example, if you're an RA or you're a leader in a club or a group and you love speaking for your group, advocating for them, all these different things, that's a skill that can be translated over into the medical field. But you need to be able to see, what are the skills I'm looking for, to self-evaluate how you yourself exhibit those skills in other settings. Other things to consider are there specific moments that confirmed your decision? This is where story banking comes in. Did shadowing professionals in the industry help you see yourself in their shoes? And by exploring this field, what skills did you identify that contribute to the success of a profession in that setting? Again, going back to those intangibles, these other skills, these soft skill sets, putting it all together and helping to see, are these skills I see in myself? Are these skills that I want to, or values that I want in my career? And how have I seen that in other activities I've been a part of? All part of that confirmation of, you know, why I want to get into this profession.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've even had students, even through doing things like our case competitions in our office or research in general. And that's been that confirmation piece that really helps them see, wow, I really want to be a lifelong learner in the health field and continuing to learn about this specific chronic illness or about this specific thing within the health field that really is I'm passionate about. So whatever it may be, whether it is gaining those intangible interpersonal skills with patients or gaining critical thinking skills with research, a lot of it can be brought into that personal statement.
That's great. The now and the future.
Awesome. So Emilio and Danny and myself, I know we've already started talking about really that spark, that confirmation. That's a huge part, I think, of the personal statement, to get the reader to understand, you know, why is this something that I want? How did it even come about? But the now and future is such a huge chunk of the personal statement. And I think this is honestly my personal favorite now that I'm thinking about it, because of the Excel program, because of what we preach. You know, we preach so much to students. What are you currently doing in college to really help you to succeed in the future? What kind of experiences are you in? And this is what we push so much. I know, Danny, that you would agree with me on this. So the now and future really discusses in the personal statement, what are you currently doing? And what do you want your future to really look like? What is this program going to help you to achieve in the future? So some questions that you're going to want to consider are, you know, what are you currently doing, like I said, to develop the necessary transferable skills needed in this profession, whether it is, you know, PA, whether it is MD, DO, whatever program, dentistry you're wanting to go into. And do you understand why these skills are relevant? You know, are you doing something that is intentional? I bring up that word all the time in my appointments. It needs to be intentional. Don't just do something to do it. Do it because it's really going to help your future. And now that a lot of you guys who are listening in are at the point of writing your personal statements, you hopefully can see why it's so important to be doing things that are intentional. That way you can speak on them. You also want to be thinking about, how will this school or this program really help you to achieve your goals? I'm thinking more specifically about the program. Why are you doing this specific program? Why not another? You know, a lot of questions that I even get, I know we're talking about personal statements, but like sometimes during mock interviews, I ask a student, what would you do if you couldn't be in healthcare? What would you do if you couldn't be in this exact program? And that's a great question to ask yourself. That way you can start to realize, why am I applying to this specific program? Why will it help me to achieve the goals that I want, or the skills that I want? And then thinking about your values, you know, and how it aligns to this industry. That's so important as well. A lot of you guys that are listening, I'm sure, are young in college, but starting to think about what you want in the future, and if this program or if this specific area of study really aligns with that, and why it's important to you. And then what personal characteristics do you possess? And I think a lot of the personal characteristics you can gain through the experiences that you have in undergrad, whether it is like shadowing, whether it's volunteering, and can you really provide evidence? That's so key, because that is this section, providing evidence that you have experience in this field, that you have volunteered, you have shadowed, you have done an internship, you have done research. The list kind of goes on and on, but that's why this is such an important really chunk of your personal statement.
And I think Gabby mentioned a lot of great points. I think in the personal statement, you could also talk, you know, as Gabby mentioned, in the future, talk about the type of impact you want to make. You don't have to just talk about that individual school. You may want to have a global impact. Like, yeah, I want to be a doctor and work in a hospital, but I actually want to give back to my community, or I want to go into India, or I want to go to another country and make an impact in that community as well. These are definitely things you want to talk about, especially if you're zeroing in this personal statement to a specific program that does a lot of mission trips or has those same values. You're not only showing how your own values align with the industry, but it also aligns with that program that might be your top choice.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that, Emilio.
Perfect. So a lot of great content that we've been able to talk about and help you kind of consider. But some other questions you want to consider is, what factors are you considering in a professional program? This kind of leads perfectly into what I just mentioned about mission trips or research or career outlook or the values. You know, I do think it's important that whatever program you select, and I definitely think you should have multiple schools that you're thinking about, look at the values of them. How does that align with yourself? What are they providing? And how does this provide it with the factors that you really are zeroing in on? Because these are questions that come up, and in a personal statement, you could address these type of things.
Exactly. And in this conclusion that you have, summing all of these things together, it's bringing that theme that we've been bringing up throughout this whole webinar all together to really tie up all these experiences, the spark, the confirmation. You really want to tie it up so that the readers really understand where it is you're coming from and what you want to do with this profession that you're entering. Why, you know, this school specifically, you want to show them the values that you're looking for in a program, but also what you can contribute yourself to the program too. So if they seem to be a school that you're applying to that values, you know, community service in the local area, maybe you want to emphasize that you are someone who really values that service and engagement with maybe volunteering around or working at a hospital. Some questions to look into for the conclusion is something like, what factors are you considering in that professional program, and how does this program align with those factors that you are looking for? So thinking about your own values that you have, some of those non-negotiables you're looking for in a program. These are some things you really want to show them, you know, I've done my research and this program is really special and I'd be a great fit for it. You want to show them that piece that sets you apart from those other applicants. So I know Emilio, Gabby, and I, we've talked about that wow factor in other webinars in the past. And this is that piece that really makes you unique when you're applying as an applicant, whether that's maybe a specific shadowing opportunity or a mission trip that you did abroad or to another state. What are those things that really help you stand out and show them you've been committed to this health field? You want to show them what your future goals are. So like Amelia was saying, if your future goals are maybe opening up a clinic to help that community, talk about that a little bit more, just to show them, you know, this is the sort of impact I want to make in the field. And through your program, I really believe I can make that mission come true and show them how you can tangibly make those efforts come into fruition. And that last question that we've talked about is how does this tie into your theme and those next steps? So a lot of it is just finding a way to tie up a lot of the mission, the passion, the spark, all of it together, so that those the admission committee can see you've got a clear statement of your goals and why you want to go into that program.
Absolutely, Danny. This is exactly the things that you should be considering and putting together as, you know, you're thinking about personal statements as a whole. And so your future goals, the factors, what sets you apart, and putting all the themes together to be able to have a sell point for it. And I know we're going to be talking about some resources, but know that you're not alone. I know that some of this can feel a little daunting, especially if you're not familiar with writing, but you're telling your story. And I know earlier we focused, Gabby and I were talking about recording yourself. The whole purpose of that is, if you're not a writer, then talk it out loud. If you're not a talker, then write it down. Whatever steps you need to do to get it across, but you need to find a way to get down to the fire inside you that led you to this, because there has to be a fire in it. That's why we say a spark, because going through undergrad and being a bio major, being a pre-health major, or being any major that's leading you into a grad program, it's a mountain that you're climbing. And so you need to be motivated to kind of climb that mountain. And so what's been driving you, share that essence with that application committee. And we've mentioned, just like at any story, movie, Netflix show, there's a lot of ways of telling a story. There's a lot of way of being able to set the tone. And so that's something that the resources we're going to be talking about can help you set the tone and create that narrative for yourself. Perfect. So some final tips, and then we're going to talk about some resources. I think this is all of us.
Yeah, I can start this one, Mila, if you would like.
Jump on into it.
So we want to give just some final tips to you all who are listening. Number one, definitely reading your draft out loud to see if the message you're wanting to give makes sense. I know in my appointments, I always read the personal statement out loud to the student. It helps even me as the advisor to catch errors. But if you're alone doing any sort of brainstorming or draft writing or anything like that, also do yourself a favor and just read it back out loud. I know it's super helpful to do that.
Absolutely. And definitely, you know, there's a lot of resources out there for you. The Writing and Communication Center is a great resource. That's one that's going to help you grammar, punctuation, spelling, structure of it all. Definitely someone that could really help you out and develop. And then obviously our career advisors and career development office. So we have some experts already on the call that we're giving those tips. But working with a career advisor, especially in that brainstorming session, we can help start pulling those elements of the personal statement. And we say to start early because everyone's different. Some people go from that brainstorming session right into writing a first draft. Some of them tackle it little by little and be like, hey, let's brainstorm. And then the next session, let's come up and outline some of these themes we put together. From those themes, let's story bank things and putting it together, then writing our first draft, and then getting reviewed. You have a lot of resources. Don't hesitate to use all of them simultaneously. You could be meeting with a career advisor, the Writing and Communication Center, talking to your mentors, and sharing the drafts with each one of them. You're going to get varying opinions on it, and that's okay. At the end of the day, no matter if everyone's telling you, well, this draft looks great. After you read it, does it sound like you? Is this what you imagine? Is this the message that you were trying to get across? That's different question you should ask yourself. Does this sound great? And is this the message I'm trying to get across? Are two different questions. And you really want to make sure that the message you intended to come across or who you are as an individual, that's clear for the admissions committee.
Definitely. And I would say also to make sure that it does sound like it's your own voice. I always tell students to brainstorm with me and maybe write out that first draft first before looking at any other sample personal statements, because sometimes that can cloud your own inspiration and maybe you may unintentionally grab some pieces from those, but it's better to have this really reflect your own voice and your passion through the words and the brainstorming that we all do together. So feel free to come to your career advisor even if you're working from scratch, because sometimes even just recording that conversation and starting with that brainstorming can lead to some beautiful words on that sheet.
I agree with you, Danny. Just remember, it's important to be unique with this. This is not, and sorry, Millie, I know you just went forward, but like this is not a resume. This is not a cover letter. It's not something that's so, you know, cookie cutter. This really needs to be personal. It needs to allow the reader to get to know you in a way that maybe no one else knows you. So that is something that you want to keep in mind when writing.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you know, normally with like resumes, cover letter, or other things, you're like, oh, can I see a sample of that? I think sometimes that might even hinder you, because if you're writing your own story, you don't want to look at someone else's story and try to mirror it. You want to tell your own story, and there's no right answer to this. But I think it's hard to be objective or tell your own story when you already have read a personal statement of someone else and you want it to sound like that. You'd be surprised on how much you start mimicking that or even limiting yourself. That person has a whole different level of experiences, motivations, and things that have impacted their own journey. You have a whole different story to tell. And so you should never compare yourself. And you should also focus on telling your own story without necessarily having to read another personal statement. Maybe after you're done, you could look at other samples, but I think in that starting up period, that can lead you down the wrong road as opposed to getting you started. And finally, NSU Career Development can help you here. So as we always end our segments, you can schedule an appointment through Handshake and look at all of our advisors' availability. You can call in our office, 954-262-7201. Again, now we're right now working remotely, but we have appointments available for you through Zoom. We can work with you, brainstorm, develop, and give you advice not just on the personal statement, but your whole application to grad school and many more after that. And so I know we've gone over a lot of content, and I wanted to open it up to our participants to see if you have any questions for us.
Ask away.
So you guys can unmute yourself, ask any questions. We'd be happy to answer anything that you have.
I have a question.
Please.
You mentioned at the beginning about, well, I like the personal statement stuff is very interesting. I thought you guys were very clear on that. So I don't have as many questions on the personal statement process itself. But you did mention that you guys had a YouTube channel where you guys post the fins up. So I was wondering if you guys had a link to that or like the name of the YouTube channel where I could go and review.
It's NSU Career. So if you go there, you'll be able to find all of our segments for Wake Up Pre-Health Sharks, in addition to any info sessions or other things we've hosted. This week alone, right after we're done here, I actually have a session with the Osteopathic Medical School where they're doing their own info session. And so videos are right there. You're going to be there as well. Perfect. So all of those are on our YouTube channel, NSU Career.
Thank you so much.
And every week I've actually been adding them to the Handshake. So there's a resource tab called Pre-Health Resources, and all the links are posted there every week too. So you can find them on either channel. It'll be linked to the YouTube video.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Sure, I'll shoot a question.
Hi, Lorena.
What do you guys think is the biggest mistake that you see when people are starting to write their personal statements or after they finish? Like the biggest thing that probably irks you the most?
I'll start off. I think a negative tone. I think sometimes I've noticed with personal statements where whether you're talking about a struggle or maybe not doing so well in an org class or sometimes when you have the wrong tone on a personal statement, not just negative, but just the wrong tone, it can really hinder the personal statement where the reader's trying to figure out, well, what's their story, but they're focusing on all these negative experiences. I think talking about experiences that have happened to you, but talked about how they've impacted you in terms of the journey that almost was the catalyst for you reaching your goals, instead of just diving into this happened to me and this was so difficult. Like it's important to say that, and that's sometimes these stories are very difficult to share, but you need to reframe them in a way where you're answering the true question, how these experiences led you to the career you're going into. And I think another thing is when it's impersonal. So I think my last one was about too personal, where you're letting it be emotional, you're not focusing it in on what led you to this journey. The other part is being impersonal, like I said, starting with quotes of other people, being broad, where, you know, medicine allows me to help people and that's why I'm excited about it. You could say that, but if you're not backing it up with direct experiences or ground level things, it's a very generic statement and not necessarily true to who you are as an individual.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Amelia. Sorry, Danny.
No, go ahead, Gabby.
Just saying, like, you know, I've like Amelia and like Danny, we've read so many personal statements of students, you know, throughout the years, and I think I see that a lot is that negativity piece of students were to say, for example, I didn't do research, but I did shadowing. Like, you should not say what you have not done in your personal statement. It should only be a selling piece of what you have done and why you're proud of those experiences. So really thinking about that, Lorena and everyone else listening, this should be a selling piece. Every single sentence should go back to why they should accept you, not why they shouldn't. So keep that in mind.
I think mine would probably be, in addition, of course, to what they're saying, maybe the personal statements that end up being like a retelling of the resume, like I had mentioned earlier, where it's like they're trying to fit and condense every detail of what they've done since maybe high school or freshman year up until senior year. But instead, the personal statement should focus on those big highlights and major points that you've done that you really want to focus in on, that gave you maybe those key skills you really want to amplify. So it's those ones that really try to fit every piece. It's more quality over quantity is what we're shooting for in the personal statement.
And then the last thing I would say of something that's pitfalls of a personal statement is when you have good paragraphs, but they're all islands. One thing we didn't talk about today was transitional sentences. Like, you want to make sure your personal statement is following some sort of timeline where you're not talking in one experience about your senior year and the next paragraph's about high school. And then the next one is sophomore year. Like, it's bouncing around too much. you need to make sure you're going from one paragraph to another, and it doesn't feel like you're jumping from a jacuzzi to a pool. Like it's transitioning smoothly. Like, you know, the more and more let's say you have a paragraph on shadowing and working in healthcare, you're saying the more and more I shadowed in healthcare, the more I saw myself as a healthcare professional and becoming a doctor and seeing the impact they can have. However, I was still very excited about some of the topics and knowledge base, and I wanted to immerse myself further in some of the topics. And so I started pursuing research opportunities in the field. And then the next, one of my first research opportunities was, and you see how I transitioned smoothly from one to another.
Mm-hmm. Great question.
David, I was shaking my head at everything you guys said. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Any other questions, guys? Well, thank you all for joining us today. Tune in next week where we have another segment of Wake Up Pre-Health Sharks. And again, all of this information is going to be on our YouTube page. And you should have seen some of our last recordings on the pre-health newsletter that went out this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you. We love having you all.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Guys, have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
I miss you too.
Aw.
That's so nice.
When are you going to meet with me?
Definitely soon, I promise.
Okay. I'm going to email you right after this.
Okay, cool.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, Amelia, I think it's still recording.
Another successful session.
I think it's still recording, Emilio.
Perfect. Let me stop recording.
Perfect.